morning. Hope everybody's doing okay this morning. Those of you that were here Wednesday night, I read from the book of 2 Chronicles. Wednesday night was our reading and song service, being the last Wednesday night of the month. And I read from 2 Chronicles, the 10th chapter. So if you would, go ahead and turn over there and just kind of mark that place, because this is where I guess you would say the context of our lesson comes from, at least the story that I'm going to use in the lesson this morning. What we find going on here, if you wasn't here Wednesday night, we are going to hit the highlights of this chapter so you will understand the lesson too. What we find going on here is a very interesting thing, but that happened to the Israelites. We find, the way that I put it, was the last straw that fractured God's people, splitting the 12 tribes of Israel into two nations. Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And this is a very important turning point. As we learn from the reading, who we take counsel with, or who we take advice from, the way that we would say it today, plays a very major role in our decision-making process, and we need to be aware of that. Of course, as we study this, we also will see perfect proof of how true Christ's statement is in Matthew 12 and verse 25 that we just studied in the adult class, which says, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand." Now, as we just studied, as we're going through Matthew, Christ was saying that because he had been challenged that he was performing these, getting the devil out of people by the power of the devil. And that's when he made this statement. But it certainly applies. The reason why he used that, I believe, is because everybody would understand what he was saying. Because actually, anything that is split, any idea that is split into two, whether it's a city, whether it's a country, whether it's the devil and God, that can't stand. That can't stand. That will not take hold. Well, let's just paraphrase just a little bit. Let's just kind of summarize what is going on here in this chapter. This is what happened in the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Now, as I'm talking about this, those are two close names in the way that they are spelt and pronounced. So I thought the way that I kept that separate as I read through it and I studied and put it, Rehoboam was a relative. Okay? Starts with an R. Jeroboam was a jerk. Not really in the lesson any more than the other, but that's the way I remembered it. So let's talk about it just a little bit. In the days of Rehoboam, he was to be crowned king of Israel and Shechem. Rehoboam took counsel with his elders under his father Solomon. So we find out who Rehoboam is. He's the son of Solomon. And Solomon had just completed his reign. And a request came to him by the people. And these people were led by Jeroboam. And Jeroboam was a previous, not a counselor really, a servant, more of a servant under Solomon. But he didn't hold with everything that Solomon was doing, particularly in the way that the people were being treated. So he actually fled and has come back. To make a longer story somewhat short, and he has kind of gathered God's people. Maybe what you would say is a protest that we see today. He had kind of led this protest that the way that the Israelites were being handled was too harsh. And they were pretty harsh. Solomon had actually enforced some slave labor to help build his kingdom. So he wasn't necessarily wrong. So as the people put that problem to Rehoboam, they told him and they said to reduce our taxes, lighten the workload of your people, they said. So as Jeroboam brought this complaint of the people forward, and Rehoboam heard it, he took counsel with his father's, Solomon's, elders. We read that as we went through, and they instructed him in this way. The elders of Solomon that worked under Solomon instructed him this way. Be kind and serve the people, and they will serve you forever. That was the elders' way of helping Rehoboam to solve this problem. Did Rehoboam take their counsel, their suggestion to mind, and put it into practice? Well, I don't know what his intention was, but he did seek more counsel. He also wanted to talk to his young men that were around him, and the King James Version says the men that he grew up with, friends of his, from childhood. He took counsel from them. And their answer was, in a way, that this is what Rehoboam said to the people about their request. And I want you to listen to the harshness of this. He said, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. In other words, it's not exactly what this means, but that made him a big man. For whereas my father put a heavy yoke upon you, I will put more to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Now, I did a little bit of research on and there's some conflicting ideas of what he meant here by these scorpions. Whatever the case is, I don't think it seems to be a consensus that he wasn't talking about the animal, the scorpion. There was a whip that had been specialized, had been used, and had anything from glass shards to rocks to metal on the tip of it that was actually called in history a scorpion. So I kind of lean that that's probably what the case was, is that his father, he mentions the whip, but that he would chastise them with scorpions. Some of these, they actually said, had looked like a fish hook on it. So when you hit and it recoiled, it would dig into the skin, not just strike and cut the skin, but go into the skin and have to be pulled out in the recoil of the whip. So, yes, Rehoboam made things much tougher. Now that's just a short version of what the chapter is talked about there, and I encourage you to go back and read that chapter because it really builds a story that I am trying to somewhat loosely base today's stories on. And that is as far as we're going to go with the story of the two tribes of Israel, or the two nations of Israel, I should say. But we're going to use this to show how today we can both parallel and contrast can be drawn from this story. Now, I want to ask you to think a little deep as we go through this and to think about the story that you just heard and how it was used. Because what we're going to do as we draw these parallels and these contrasts, we're going to talk about our king, okay? We're going to talk about our king and his method of rule compared to the rule of both Rehoboam and Jeroboam, okay? And we're going to talk about the misconceptions of harshness between either God and harshness of the world of today. And we're going to see which one is harsh. And we're also going to talk about how we must today make a decision, just like the people here in the days of Rehoboam had to make a decision of which king they were going to follow. Which direction were they going to go? We are really facing nothing different today as far as having to make a choice goes. But we're also going to see some contrasts. And we are going to start to see those contrasts by biblically finding out who our king is. Who is our king? If you ask that today out in the world, some people would frown and say, right now it's Donald Trump. That's what he wants to be. He wants to be our king. What would your answer be? Well, I think I know what your answer would be. Your answer would be, look at John 18 and verse 37. John 18 and verse 37, because this is what the Bible is telling us who our king is today. John 18 and verse 37. Let's see what it says there. Pilate, therefore, this is Pilate talking to Jesus. Pilate, therefore, said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. That leads us to understand that Jesus is our king. Let's go a little further, or maybe a little backwards. Let's turn over to Luke and verse 1 and verse 32. This was our reading this morning, but I want to look at one little part of it again. Luke 1. Luke 1, and I'm going to reread verses 32 and 33. This is Gabriel speaking. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, talking to Mary, and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom shall be no end. So we're not looking as Christians. We're not looking as children of God for any other king to advance from society to be our king. Jesus' reign, Jesus' kingdom, it tells us here, will be forever. So, who are we going to serve? It says it will be of no end. Well, let's compare just a little bit how Christ rules to how Rehoboam ruled, because we have a little information in that, but Jeroboam was the same way. So we're going to compare Christ's method against Rehoboam's method. And I really want us to let this sink in. Because, folks, we could be under a king. We could be living the same way that folks were living in the day of these two men. We could be there. I did a real close study of how these men conducted their kingdoms and what life was like. And you know what it sounds like? Communism. Sounds a lot like communism. As a matter of fact, if you look up and study about communism, it mentions Rehoboam. Can you believe that? It mentions Rehoboam and the way that he served his people in the days of the Old Testament. Now, I titled this Servanthood versus Tyranny. Okay? Tyranny is a word that we understand somewhat here in the United States, because right after the United States was established, I think it was around early 1780s, the United States almost turned into a tyranny, because there were so many ideas of the people that the government almost had to take the reins and to dictate what the United States people would do. And today, we are facing this again with some of the people that are being elected into government offices and places. You're going to start hearing a lot about communism in the United States. Here's how Rehoboam lived. Rehoboam, he demands absolute control. No freedom for his subjects. And he does this to fund his own lifestyle and legacy, giving them heavier burdens when they ask for relief. So Rehoboam's people that were following him, asked that their burden be lightened. And he said, no, you think my father was tough? I will be much tougher. Some 60 to 80% said no thank you and followed Jeroboam. Look how Christ rules. Look what Christ says. You see, Jesus completely flips the world's definition of power. And you got to see, along with me, how superior this is, and how fortunate we are to live today than back under this time. Rehoboam gave the people no options. He was absolute power. Christ completely flips it, stating that the greatest of the people must be a servant. He goes on in Matthew 20 and verse 28, and the Bible there says, Jesus came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So the Bible goes on to tell us that it wasn't Jesus was free of the people, and the people that the greatest has got to serve. He said, I'm the greatest, and I came to serve. I came to serve. So certainly the greatest among you must serve. Let's talk about their burdens and their heavy yokes. Rehoboam's rule, he deliberately chooses to make the people's yokes heavier and more painful if you slipped, if you fell. You can imagine in your mind the actions that were being taken, especially if the scorpion was what we had said that it was. If the scorpion was what they used to chastise people with, and their yokes were heavier than they were even under Solomon. Christ's rule. Jesus offers rest and relief from heavy emotional, spiritual, and physical burdens. Matthew 11:29 through 30, he invites followers to take his yoke. You all are familiar with that scripture where he says, take my yoke. But what did he promise? For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Completely the opposite of what we've seen in the days of Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Completely opposite. Are you glad to be living today? Do you feel fortunate that this is the world that you live in today, that we are under? I really think that parts of our country, people all over our country, are losing sight of that. We're losing sight of it. And it's almost like we're willing to give it back. Arrogance versus humility. Let's talk about that just a little bit. Under Rehoboam's rule, his rule was driven by pride. He speaks roughly to the people. He uses intimidating language and asserts his dominance to prove his absolute authority. Some of the things that I studied and read about, I'm sparing you from those things. Because we have studied those things here, but it is horrific that the things that were done. We hear of things done in our country today and we think, oh, that can't be real. It's been here before. It's been in this world before. Look at Christ's rule that he promised us. Jesus approaches God's children, which is all of humanity in this sense. Jesus approaches God's children with ultimate humility. Did he ask us for things? Did he put stripes on our back? Did he put whips on our back? Think about what he did in John 13, 1 through 12. That's obviously a little long for me to read this morning. But what he did in John chapter 3 verses, I'm going to put my glasses on. John chapter 13 verses 1 through 12 was right after the Lord's Supper, or at the Lord's Supper. What did he do? Do you remember? He washed the apostles' feet. Can you be and show any more humility? Can you imagine the characters of Jeroboam and Rehoboam washing the feet of their servants? No. No, that was not part of the deal. Christ showed ultimate humility. In Philippians 2 and verse 8 it says that he humbled himself. He humbled himself by becoming obedient. Obedient to who? Obedient to God. He humbled himself by being obedient to God a little bit. He humbled himself to be obedient to God as long as him and God agreed on things. Right? He humbled himself that far. No. He humbled himself to the point of death. Can you do that? Can you humble yourself to the point of death? Now, me and you might think, well, I could do that. Well, let me tell you, we didn't come from the place that Christ did. Christ came from the mountain. We're in the valley. And he come down to that valley and humbled himself even lower. And that is amazing to me. Well, I mentioned earlier that we are in the same position as the Israelite nation before the split. Here we stand in these last days. We are going to wear a yoke. I want each and every one of us here to understand this and to hear this clearly. We are going to wear a yoke. That's what we were built for. We are built to be servants. We are built to carry the weight. It's who will we carry the weight for? The Israelite nation didn't understand that at one time back in these days. But they found it out. Because you see, old Jeroboam had a weight too. Now, so if we are going to wear this yoke, what does that mean? That means that we're going to be ruled by something. So today, what do you choose to be ruled from? Which king do you choose to have as your king? Well, now you might say, well, now wait a minute. You just told me that Christ was our king. Who is the other king? Most of you know. Most of you know who the other king is. What will your decision be? Where's the other king? It's the ruler of this world. The ruler of this world. Actually, Jesus uses the name, the ruler of the world, at least 3 times in my studying about the devil. He is the ruler of this world. In John 12 and verse 31, Jesus says in his own words, now in the judgment, of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And he's speaking about the devil. In John 14 and verse 30, he says, I will no longer talk much with you, talking about his disciples, for the ruler of this world is coming. Jesus knew his death was drawing nigh. And he said, I won't be talking to you much longer because the ruler of this world is coming. And I'm leaving because he has no claim on me. I won't stay where he is at, not bodily. He is also called by the Apostle Paul the God of this world. So if king and ruler isn't big enough for you, Paul calls him the God of this world. And he explains that the devil exerts power. Listen to this. He explains that the devil exerts power by spiritually blinding humanity. Spiritually blinding. Now, folks, what that tells me is when I hear something that sounds right, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, I need to be careful. Because that's the way the untruth is supposed to come to you. And something that sounds right. In 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4, it specifically talks about, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel and the glory of Christ. Has your mind been blinded? Has my mind been blinded to the will of Christ by this world? Well, this comes in many different forms. I think this blinding takes many forms. But here is the one that I think is the most challenging. Now, it's broad when you think about it. It gets very broad. But one of the most popular deceptive is, where is the yoke the heaviest? Is the yoke the heaviest when you're following God? Or is the yoke the heaviest when you are following the world? Now, as a Christian, you might say, I understand this. I don't have this problem. I know where the yoke is the heaviest. You're still tempted. You still make mistakes. We all still sin on occasion. And we have to understand where this deception, where this blinding is coming from. Because when we make those mistakes and those kind of things enter our mind, what we're actually saying is the world's yoke is a little lighter than God's yoke. You know, we say things like, well, I have to go to church Sunday morning. I've said that. I have to go to church Sunday morning. You know, I can't do that because I'm a Christian. And we've all heard the phrasing should be different. We should say, I get to go to church Sunday morning. We should say, I don't want to do that because I am a Christian. But you see, we get right on that line of not understanding. We don't say we get to. We don't say, I don't want to. We use other phrasing. And that comes from our minds and our hearts. We have to be careful with that. So, if the problem, the blinding, takes the form of which yoke is the heaviest, then this is what we need to be very, very, very aware of. The devil convinces people that the world's yoke is lighter. But the devil is the master of deception. And how are we going to go down the wrong road? By being deceived, by not seeing the true light. So what I'm trying to impress upon us this morning is understand that when we see things that look right, examine it closely because it may be deception by the devil. You see, the deception hits us of the devil in some of these forms. He presents the world's yoke as an unburdened, no ruler, I should say, over you. You are independent. There's no ruler over you. And that takes your burden away. The world takes your burden away. Christ, any religion, puts a burden on you. That's what the devil says. He says, look at my world. And he presents it as a thrilling place in pursuit of immediate gratification. His number one prize, his number one thing to make you think the world is not the burden. As you do something that the world thinks you're entitled to a prize, you generally get it immediately. You generally get it immediately. He also gives you comfort. Because these things that we have, this money that we make, brings us comfort. There's a lot of people in this world that still can't afford air conditioning. I know a lot of them that can't afford air conditioning. We come into this building, and sometimes we come in, and it's hot, and we complain. Sometimes we come in, and it's cold, and we complain. You realize there's people living in this world that never had air conditioning? You know, not too long ago, we sold it's been a few years. We sold a vehicle to a friend of mine that belonged to Lynette and John. Not too long, maybe about a year after they had it, the air conditioner went out. And I said, I didn't know the air conditioner went out. And they said, yeah, we only know it because we were just moving. You know, we hit that button and it didn't come on by accident. We never used it. And I said, well, why don't you use the air conditioner? They couldn't afford the decrease in the gas mileage. So we don't use the air conditioner. Folks, we're spoiled. We're extremely spoiled in this world. And I'm afraid one of these days, even within some of our lifespans, we are not going to have those so-called niceties. But the devil, he'll come up with something else. Do you see where God may have to take these things away for you to understand that you're being deceived, that is a nice thing? The devil, he deceives humanity. The devil alters human perception. And listen close to this. He alters human perception so that freedom looks like slavery. He makes God's freedom look like slavery. And then he also makes slavery look like freedom. Over here you're free. And he says you're in slavery. Over here you are in slavery. And he says, no, you're free. And we can very easily be deceived by that. The reality in Proverbs 14 and verse 12, and I want to read that. Proverbs 14 and verse 12. Proverbs 14 and verse 12. I've already said this a couple times this morning. Look what it says. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. What does that tell us? I know as a Christian, I can go out here in this world and I can take part in things that I know are wrong. Can't you do that? I can take part in things that I know are wrong. I know that I'm sinning when I do this, and for some reason I just can't get over that, and I do it. You know, that shouldn't be the one that actually scares us to death. This should be the one that scares us to death. There's a way in the world that seems right to man. And in the end, it is death because it is wrong. It's those things that we look at and we think this is the right thing to do, that the Bible warns us so strictly about and says, think about it. Is that right? Let's go a little bit further. See if we can't get out of this deception. The devil, as we've already discussed, offers loads of pleasure. As the song says, he offers us all those shiny things. All those shiny things that hinder us. and then he hides the bill for it. He don't give us the bill. Oh yeah, we think we're eat up with bills. Because part of the money I make has got to go pay for these things. Boy, Scott, I understand what you're talking about. I get bills every month. My mailbox is full. That ain't the payment I'm talking about. That ain't the payment the Bible is talking about. It's talking about the death of your soul. That's what the charge is. You see, there is a way that seems right unto man, but its end is a way of death. This is what I want to say and what I want us to be aware of. Chuck will understand this. Jake will understand this. All the guys that work out will understand this. When you're working out, what do you have a lot of times, especially if you're trying to push yourself? You have a spotter, don't you? You know, you got somebody standing right there that if this weight is a little too heavy for me, this person's going to help me clear it. Help me get it the rest of the way up. The world doesn't have any spotters, you see. Have you ever seen the videos on TikTok or wherever it may be where somebody doesn't have a spotter sitting around and they bench pressing something, they lift it up and it comes to their chest and that's where it sits. They can't go back up. These things are put on there to be funny a lot of times. But folks, that's what we do if we're not careful. We let the bills of this world, and I'm not talking about your car payment, I'm not talking about your house payment, I'm talking about the love of this world, be so heavy, get so heavy for us that we can't get out from under that weight. It becomes too late to get out from under that weight. You see, we find ourselves in all kinds of addictions. And I'm not talking about just drugs and alcohol. Those are certainly included. But we find ourselves trapped under all kinds of addictions. We find ourselves in this condition in a broken marriage. How many people do you think have gotten divorced, gotten other spouses, and they look back and they think, I should have never done that. What was I thinking? You see, they sneak up on us. Any soul-crushing debt to the world, your yoke has been increased. When the devil's telling you, no, the yoke's over there. The one that you're serving over there, there's where your yoke is so heavy. Come on over here. The yoke is not that heavy. The deception. The devil convinces people that true freedom means having no king, no master at all. Answering to no one and therefore defining one's own truth. Man, you can be your own ruler. You ever heard that? Yeah, in the Garden of Eden, the devil told Eve, you will become like God. You'll rule your own life. The reality, human beings are hardwired to serve something. Do you realize that? You're hardwired to serve something. That's within you. If someone rejects God as king, because we look around in our world today and we think, what's wrong with these people? Why are these people protesting? They must be getting paid. Some probably are, but you think about this. If someone rejects God as king, they do not become completely independent. We never do. They simply become slaves to their own desires. And sometimes those desires include public opinion. They include cultural trends. So they're busy serving something. If they are getting paid and they're doing it for that, then they're busy serving money. That's what they're serving. 2 Peter 2 and verse 19 exposes this exact type. And I want to read this. 2 Peter, and I understand that this lesson is a little bit long, but I really want to stress to you because it's so prevalent in our world today. 2 Peter 2 and verse 19. Now listen to this. While they promised them liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption. Do we see that in our leaders today? And I'm not even talking about what we would consider on the devil's side. You remember there were two kings here that we studied of old. While they promised them liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption. For of whom a man is overcome, of the same is he brought into bondage. If this ain't a description of the world today, and really the world that's always been, but today is particularly important. If that's not the description, I don't know what is. You see, we can be the undivided Israelite nation, or God's chosen people. All of humanity can. Which yoke will you choose? Which yoke will you put on? The devil offers a crown of self-rule, but delivers a heavy chain of spiritual bondage. And that's torture in hell for eternity. Meanwhile, Jesus offers a light yoke of surrender that delivers absolute rest and freedom to the human soul. Now you might say as we come to the end of this, well, Scott, the country that we're living in, you just made both sides, the devil's side, which you said is us advancing back toward communism, and then our current leader's side. Both are bad. That's exactly what I meant to say. That's exactly what I meant to say. God tells us the only king that you have in this world, which is doomed to be destroyed, doesn't live here. He's left this world and he's gone to prepare a place for you. There is not going to be any good when it comes to ruling in this world. Because the only person that was the ultimate ruler who loved us, he died for us. He became humble for us. Let's don't go out here and choose Rehoboam or Jeroboam. Let's choose God. And folks, it has to be a choice. It has to be a committed choice. If there's anything that we can do for you here this morning as you're making your choice, let's talk about it. And that don't matter if you are a sinner or saved. We all have problems. Let's talk about them. Let's work on it. Why? Because it's easy to go blind. And we want to see. I want to see. I want to see the truth. And I do not want to be deceived. How many times have you heard in this world right now, I don't know what to believe. I don't believe what I see, I don't believe what I hear, and I don't believe what the person's telling me. Wrong. There is one thing you can believe if we will just open our eyes. Please come forward as we stand and as we sing.